I was married to a woman for over 10 years, and when she hit her 30s and had kids, she started to gain weight and looked haggard. As a result of this, I started to feel less sexually attracted to her, and since I was out working, thus meeting new people daily, I started to feel more sexually attracted to younger, slimmer, less worn-out women. So I wanted to embrace myself and my life by making up for lost time. Thus I went home to my wife, got her drunk repeatedly, and over a series of months I repeatedly told her that she was no longer that attractive to me, that I found other women prettier, thinner, more fun, interesting, and overall better women in my opinion. Additionally, after this psychological abuse, I reminded her that I wasted my youth with her, that I only had sex with 5 women before her, and not only is that a low number for a man, but also these women were terrible at sex. Then after that emotional abuse, I knew I nearly had her psyche broken. But just to make sure she did not object and drop the divorce hammer on me and possibly take my kids, I reminded her that I was her only source of income. That not only would she be homeless, but jobless and penniless. As a result of these factors, the courts would probably give me the children. She would be left all alone. She conceded shortly after that and let me have sex with a random woman I met at a bar that night. I came home and told her. She pretended to like it, but I could tell she was faking. So I went into more detail, telling her how much better she was than my wife, how she made me feel ways my wife never did, that I regretted wasting so much of my sexual youth on my wife. I knew my wife could smell the woman on me. I knew she could smell her sex. Her taking my disrespect of her only made me despise her more, and that made me feel powerful again, because before I felt powerless. You see, I was trapped in a marriage with a spouse that seemingly lived off me, that only gave me children after wasting the best years of my life, whom no longer made me feel aroused, that made me feel like having sex with her was a chore. I'm worth more than that. I deserve more than that. I'm the provider, and as such I should be able to have whatever I want. And I no longer wanted my wife. She disgusted me. Eventually that disgust became apparent to her, and she started to resent me too. She would try and lash out by having sex with other men, but the men she could get weren't all that great, and because she was old, fat, and ugly now, she got nowhere near the number of partners I did. You see, I make a lot of money, so getting sex is pretty easy. So she snapped one day, of course, and started to hit me. I had to hit back. You see, she made me hit her. She made me do it. I beat her up pretty good. The children were crying, and it was terrible chaos. I yelled at her. See what you made me do? Now our children are crying. I stormed out and had sex with one of my now steady girlfriends. I didn't come home that night. My wife repeatedly called me and messaged me, but I despised her too much. I wanted to let her know who was really in power in the relationship by making her lose sleep over me being gone all night. The next day I pretended to apologize. I told her I went over to my girlfriend's place and asked her if she had any steady boyfriends that would let her stay with them for a while, like my girlfriend let me stay with her. I wanted it to sink into my wife that she had no one else in the world but me. that I was her sole source of support and shelter. I pretty much despise my wife now. I'm just waiting for the children to get a little older so the divorce won't be that traumatizing to them. I still have sex with my wife, but I receive no pleasure from it. And I actually have way more sex with other women during the week than her. Sometimes I don't even wash afterwards, and allow my wife to taste those other women's vaginas on my penis while she performs on me. I think she is too beaten down by now, and too submissive to me. I think that she doesn't even notice that she has the fluids of other women in her mouth. This only makes me despise her more. I no longer hate my wife for wasting my youth. I no longer feel joy from abusing her like I did to get the sexual freedom I felt entitled to. I now only feel pity for her and have absolutely no respect for her. I even regret having children with her, this pitiable, sad, beaten creature. I will be glad when she is finally out of my life. This patriarchy tale was fictional, inspired by, I believe, the New York Post article and the Jezebel article that followed it about the man who lets his wife sleep around, the man who's a stay-at-home dad, the man who tries to comfort himself by saying he gets to occasionally sleep with other women as best as he can. I did this to show how abusers work. This is a slightly exaggerated and masculinized version of what this man's wife has been doing, is doing, and will do to her husband in the future. Whereas men use overt physical beatings eventually, this woman will use overt emotional and psychological and verbal beatings. She will eventually use subtle behaviors to demonstrate her dominance and despisement of her husband for allowing her to do this. She doesn't respect herself, or he doesn't respect himself. And so she won't respect him. And once a woman's lost all respect for you, she won't even be able to orgasm. She will see sex as a chore. And eventually, she will leave you. Yes. Read that article that man wrote about his wife sleeping with other men. And then listen to this again. I know way too much about abusers. I know way too much about how male and female abusers operate similarly, but differently because they have different strengths and weaknesses and different resources. Yes, in reality, this man would not. In reality, the man in this story would not be able to pull some of the stuff he did and keep his kids, but a woman would. And so, back to my script. This is the honest part, the non-fiction part. I hope that made clear how abusers work and their reasoning. Also understand that there are certain dynamics related to gender that make the wife addressed in the above article in an even greater position of power than the man in the fictional tale had. If she decides to leave him, she will probably get the kids, thus the house. He might get some form of alimony or palimony, but then he must also be expected to pay child support too. And so it'll sort of be a wash for him. It'll be a push. Additionally, he will have no shelter, only homeless shelters. And society and the courts will probably tell him to do something like man up and get a job. Take care of yourself, which will be extremely difficult for him since he has been unemployed for so long. Look, people change over time, and she can decide to leave at any moment. And it is a very bad sign for him that she's cheating on him. Very bad. She is just trying to ease the pain of the eventual divorce that has already been decided upon in her mind. I give this poor man about 3 or 5 more years before she dumps him. Sadly, yours truly, M.